Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. So today we are back again with a top 5 champion series, the final video of these kind of like series before we do a top 10 champions overall in MCOC, and it's mutant class. So first things first, I do consider that overall mutant class is the most stacked class in Marvel Contest of Champions. Objectively I consider science class to be the strongest class, but champion by champion wise I think mutant class has the most champions that would be considered good, great, amazing, insane, fun, or I don't know, worthwhile. So yeah, mutant class top lists are extremely difficult to do. So just like I did with the other two of the most stacked classes, I will give away top 6 to 10 at end of the video a bit quicker, but before we get to the actual list, I just wanted to make sure that everybody understands these are my personal opinions. I do not at any point consider myself to be any kind of authority or some sort of ultimate truth. All of these decisions, rankings are subjective based on my personal experiences, based on my personal biases and thought processes. And this is how I see the game and how I see that champion value in this game. And that being said, we're going to start off with spot number 5, and with spot number 5 we're gonna go with Sunspot. Now Sunspot is a champion that is incredibly fun, which is also one of his biggest upsides, because yeah, he's really fun to play. But in his essence, he's very basic, simple champion. He is incinerate immune. Every hit deals incinerate an opponent, so he ends up stacking a lot of incinerates on your opponents, and then you can synergize that with Despair Mastery. Also he can take these incinerates back with his heavy attack and gain power at the same time, so he has increased special attack launching speed, if you will, and overall perfect block while opponent is incinerated, plus massive level 2 damage, make this champion very simple yet very effective, especially in kind of like Act 6 where there are huge attack values currently. That is going to be nerfed though, but it's still always very helpful when you have that perfect block, where basically you can just seemingly go on for days. If you play well, you can kind of carry Sunspot through, I don't know, with 10% health for 5 fights if you don't get hit unnecessarily, because you have this 100% perfect block chance. So that alone kind of makes him quite valuable. He doesn't have much in terms of utility. In fact, you could kind of say that he has pretty much no utility at all whatsoever, outside of his damage and the perfect block, and then the little bits of being able to inflict debuffs on opponent and being incinerate immune. But what he has is very simple and very effective. It's also very fun, and he's beloved by many people, myself included. Now I am kind of holding out in hopes of pulling a 6-star Sunspot. That hasn't happened, and I'm slowly giving up, so perhaps I'll just take my 5-star to rank 5. But he certainly is a great champion with some crazy damage potential, to a point where there are no real place in a game where to kind of like fully open him up when he's max sig. But yeah, that is Sunspot. Sunspot is, in my opinion, 5th best mutant champion in the game. Additionally, as I'm going to move on to the rest of the spots, I just wanted to make sure that the spots number 4 till about number 8 again are extremely tight, and they're split by hair. And I think all of these, basically from 4th till 8th spot, all of these champions are just amazing, great champions, and pretty much ranking them comes from personal bias. I do not think that spot number 4 is significantly better than spot number 7 when we get to it. I think they are very closely packed together. I do have a quite solid top 3 though, so I think top 3 kind of like runs away a bit further from the pack for me, and I'm gonna make case for them as I get there. But let's move on to spot number 4 before we get ahead of ourselves. Spot number 4 is going to go to Havok, and I know this is going to be controversial, and I know I cannot please everybody with my lists, and I will try my best to explain why I value Havok as high, especially in this changing and kind of like increasing meta. And overall, if you think about it, Havok is a relatively similar champion to Sunspot in terms that both of them can inflict quite a lot of debuffs on opponent. Both of them are incinerate immune, both of them have alternate ways of kind of like getting power. Now Havok's power gain is slowed down, but he gains power over time, kind of similar to Doctor Strange. And both of them have access to prowess charges. Sunspot has huge level 2s, Havok has huge level 3s, not as big as Sunspot level 2s, but still they are definitely very impressive. Now the reason why I personally value Havok more is because Havok has more versatility when it comes to how he chooses to deliver his damage. Now he can deal damage with a lot of detonations, and that has become extremely kind of like beneficial in many matchups where you have access to energy damage. And I say access to energy damage, it means where you can inflict some debuffs on yourself that inflict you with energy damage, just like those energy absorption nodes in 6.4, which proved about insane Havok cheese with those nodes, with his increased energy resistance and super speed of getting charged and detonating every couple of seconds. Now, so you can choose to deal your damage with detonations, you can choose to deliver your damage with your feedback and throwing heavy attacks, you can choose to deal your damage at level 2s or level 3s. So Havok is quite versatile how to play around it, and especially recently we have seen more nodes that have quite significant attack reductions or many different conditions on how you are able to distribute your damage with any champion. Quite often also these nodes do not include level 3 damage, for instance nodes such as like Do You Sting, where you need to place a Power Sting debuff on opponent or you're going to deal 90% less damage. However, that node can be bypassed by level 3. Havok simply having the brutally large level 3 and relatively simple way how to access it, again, opens another window of utility for him. And Do You Sting is not the only node who functions that way. So that being said, I do value Havok slightly above Sunspot. I do think he's slower option. I do think Sunspot's much better for casual day-to-day questing, but I think when it comes to problem solving, I think Havok has it a bit better going on for him than Sunspot does. There's a bit of more control in the fight, and I just like added versatilities. For instance, he doubles his plasma charge speed or gaining speed whenever he has energy debuffs active, or whenever he's power locked. There are also quite few nodes that are power locking you these days, and that again kind of like works quite well for Havok. You can play the entire fight without having access to special attacks at all whatsoever, just purely relying on your feedback damage, which is also quite interesting spin to the champion. So yeah, I think Havok is somehow, some way becoming an underestimated top mutant champion, just due to the sheer fact that he might not be as fun as many other mutant champions are, but I still stand by strongly this man's utility and his abilities, and I think that he is just kind of like aging better and better with the changes of meta, and he answers many of the new nodes better than people would expect. So yeah, I personally place Havok in 4th, which I know that many people are going to jump to the comment section. And number 3 is arguably going to be more controversial choice, and that's Archangel. And Archangel is going to be number 3 mutant right now because, well, first and foremost, let's just get something clear. He has always been one of the best mutants. He has always been one of the best options where if you can bleed and or poison the opponent, he does amazing. If you can't, he sucks. So he's a relatively, let's say, quote-unquote niche champion, or at least used to be. Now, to present the largest argument I can possibly do for Archangel, I am going to go to this picture and I'm going to hide my camera for a second. And Archangel always has been more or less as useful as was the meta around him. Recently, let's say within the last 6 to 12 months, Kabam has released a really large amount of quite annoying champions to fight against, or quote-unquote defenders. And whilst they have been doing it, they have seemingly abandoned bleed or poison immunities. If we're looking at 2020 champions, for instance, we have Storm Pyramid X, no immunities. Well, Wolverine, I'm not going to count it. Platinum Full, I'm not going to count it. But anyways, none of the skilled champions have immunities either. I know Hitmonkey can shrug off the debuffs, but Archangel can shrug that off as well. And yeah, so Red Guardian, again, no immunities. None of the Mystic champions released this year has any immunities to bleed or poison. Nova, no immunities to bleed or poison. Guardian, reduced bleed damage but still can be bled, and no immunity to poison. Only champion released this year that has bleed immunity, I believe, is Terex. I might be missing an immunity somewhere, but you guys get the point. Kabam has simply moved on from bleed and poison immunities, and whilst these very tricky to deal champions are coming out, Archangel is always, like recently, one of the best, if not the best answer for many of these encounters, as you have probably noticed in I don't know, monthly uncollected quests. And even if you take a look at last year's champions, vast majority of the champions that are in fact kind of like hard and quite tricky, Archangel is extremely good answer for as well, outside of the tech class, obviously, because all of them that are immune. But even 2019 saw quite significant decline in poison and or bleed immune champions. So that being said, yes, all roads are open for Archangel, and he's fantastic counter to a lot of these champions. I expect him to make a huge comeback in upcoming month. You can probably see him much more in Alliance War defense. You can see, sorry, in Alliance War offense. You probably can see him more in AQ, or just generally as an answer to upcoming Cavalier difficulty quests, or maybe Act 7, so on and so forth, because his ability to shut down nodes and champion abilities is insane. It's always useful. It's never going to grow old. The only thing that can stop Archangel are the immunities that these champions can possibly have. And if Kabam is releasing champions with no immunities, Archangel is just going up and up and up, and his value is rising significantly these days. So that is my main argument for placing Archangel in spot number 3. Now, I know many people are going to try and argue this, but I am 100% set, and I would die on this hill currently, and this is probably the one champion position I would stand by the most strongly at the moment. That Archangel is effectively the top mutant option behind the clear 2 best mutants in the game. Speaking of the clear best 2 mutants in the game, we need to get rid of this display capture, and we can move on to spot number 2 now. Spot number 2 for me is going to be Omega Red. Omega Red has always been insane. Now, he has 2 gears. There is one champion, Omega Red, if you're not playing Suicide Masteries, and there is completely different champion when you're playing Suicide Masteries, and that is extremely important to know, as well as the fact that his signature ability, having maxed, is pretty much a demand or requirement, or in any case you need to have as high signature ability as you possibly can for him for day-to-day content. If you use him for biohazard nodes, then he might not necessarily need to be duped. All that being said, I think Omega Red is best mutant champion when it comes to Alliance War specifically, but for pretty much anything else, I think Colossus kind of like outshines him to a degree in terms of how bulky he is and how simply he can approach the fights, and how much easier also Colossus is to manage, because Omega does require fairly big finesse and your ability to play him, and I think his effectiveness and skill needed to play Omega Red well significantly increases as opponents' health go higher. At any point where you need to bait more than 2 or 3 special attacks in a fight with Omega Red, it's extremely hard to maintain his damage output to make sure all things are timed perfectly well, and that is kind of like the biggest downside of the champion that I personally do not like too much, is that he's really great for medium to short fights. As soon as he enters longer fights, yes, he can do them, but the skill needed to do so significantly increases, as well as the margin for error, as in like the fight goes longer, the more and more likely you are to kind of like make mistakes, drop your spores, significantly slow down the fight. And yes, you can obviously restart the fight and regain the control of it, but it just is not the same smooth experience anymore. Now, when it comes to bypassing stuff for Alliance War, he's surely one of the best options. Also, additionally, what I think kind of makes Omega Red insanely powerful is that his tentacle hits do not take damage from any kind of like passive damage sources, so his medium and heavy attacks, and that kind of negates Namor's viability in the meta. For instance, there's no real need to bring in Namor, let's say in Alliance War, if you're facing Electro, let's say, because Omega Red can do the fight just as effective, if not quicker, because he might not reflect the damage, but he ignores it, and his natural damage is a lot higher. So I think Omega Red kind of makes Namor a bit mute and unnecessary in a lot of different circumstances. That being said, Namor is obviously still a fantastic champion, which we're going to talk about a bit later in the video. But yeah, I can understand why many people would put Omega Red in front of Colossus. I think they are extremely close, but I personally, and for me, for more playstyle and for my experience, Colossus has come in much more clutch and much more useful in significant piece of content such as Act 6 and even AQ. He is an absolute beast due to sheer amount of utility. Now, Omega has his bleed immunity, pseudo bleed immunity, and poison immunity, but Colossus has Cold Snap, Incinerate, and bleed immunity, plus he's unbreak immune against non-tech champions. And yeah, Colossus has a lot of good stuff going on for him as well. So yeah, Omega Red, in my opinion, currently is the second best mutant. He has been the best mutant for a really long time, but I think Colossus, due to, well, his tankiness, his power, kind of like is overtaking Omega. But both of them are excellent champions, and if somebody says Omega Red is better, I will not yell foul. I can fully understand that argument and that point as well. But for me personally, the absolute shining star in the mutant class is Colossus. Now, Colossus, after his rework, it took most people quite a bit of a while to realize that he's an absolute tank. Now, one of the common complaints about Colossus is how he's reliant on this parry heavy playstyle, which is actually incredibly false, because he can dish out an absolute ton of damage without ever dropping a heavy attack in the fight. As well as exhibits, you might want to check out some of my Labyrinth of Legends streams, where he, for instance, is brutally able to out damage X23 with her huge regen. He can drop some 40k medium lights, so on and so forth. So yeah, he's an incredible destruction machine. I have made video titling Colossus best mutant in the game, in my opinion, and yeah, at this point he definitely is, because his immunities cover a lot of ground, his damage covers a lot of ground. The fact that he doesn't rely on being able to debuff the opponents is covering a lot of ground. That increased armor up is super useful. You can drop one level 3 in a fight, an opponent will never ever be able to crit, and basically Colossus kind of turns immortal after his first level 3. If you want to see example of that, again, just type in Colossus KT1, where as I'm doing Colossus showcase video, I'm showing how long it takes for Winter Soldier to get him down, and it was like well over, I think, 100 or 200 hits of Winter Soldier beating at Colossus to finally get him close to dying, kind of like thing. So he's arguably one of, if not the tankiest champion in the game, with his ability to completely switch off opponents' critical hits and a huge armor rating, taking pretty much no damage in the vast majority of the content. So that is again another thing that I think many people overlook about Colossus. Now, when it comes to his reliance on synergies, he has really good damage output without any synergies, but obviously having Omega Red turns that up to 11. And if you want to have a champion that is reliant on synergies, somebody who synergizes with Omega Red is pretty much as good as it gets, because obviously Omega Red is an insanely useful champion in his own right, and Colossus being another tank. So those two going in the quest as a duo are absolutely magnificent, and both of them carry Suicide Masters extremely well, so here's a perfect setup for them as well. And yeah, in my opinion, Colossus is just a beautiful piece of design by Kabam, and without a doubt the best rework Kabam has done on a champion thus far. Okay, now to quickly move on to the next points in the video, number 6, I'm gonna put in Namor. Where's my Namor? So Namor is a champion that initially come with a lot of hype and with a lot of kind of like promise, because he was able to deliver some really crazy damage after ramp up, but the access to that damage is not the most convenient. Additionally, his ability to reflect all of the damage back to your opponents again is looked at as something insane. Now, unfortunately for me personally, when it came to using Namor and finding places where I must rely on Namor, I just didn't find all that many. There are paths in Act 6 where seemingly Namor is the best option, and maybe there are like 3 or 4 paths like that. But that being said, vast majority of the time I found myself using either Quake or Omega Red, and Omega Red simply ignored all of the damage back anyways. Now, there are obviously specific fights where Namor may be the best champion in game 4, but there are far few less in between as I expected. And honestly, since the Namor rework, which slightly nerfed him and his regen and increased his ramp up times, therefore definitely didn't make him more attractive in my eyes, but didn't really hinder him too much either, I have never found a need or want to bring Namor back up, especially since I don't rely on 5-star prestige anymore. Now, I do think he's a good and great champion, but I think the fact that his ramp-up time is quite significant, his play style again requires quite intricate timing and relies on you setting things up perfectly, in addition to his signature ability being required in far less places than I anticipated it to be. I just don't value the champion as high. Now I can definitely see his potential and appeal, and I'm 100% sure this champion in particular has a lot of fans, but I'm not one of them, and unless I absolutely have to, I have no desire to take Namor back up to rank 5 because I seem to be doing just fine without having him. I always find different options for the fights, and he isn't the most fun and interesting champion to bring in on your day-to-day kind of quests. So it's kind of good. I like the fact that he's well off with suicides and he can handle suicide masteries extremely well, which is definitely another big benefit. But other than the synergy with suicide masteries, I really don't like the guy all that much personally, and I also haven't found that much use. Again, I had him maxed out at Sig 200, and the first chance I got, I sold him, and I never found the reason to take him back up. So maybe that's going to change in the future, but that also explains why I have him at spot number 6, not higher. Now, spot number 7, and many people are going to be crying for this, is Domino. Now, I do think that Domino is absolutely fantastic, fun, and interesting champion. I think she can do a lot by herself, but is quite reliant on her synergies, and that is again quite unfortunate, because in order to justify bringing in a 3-person synergy team in Act 6, that has to be a very, very good reason, and unfortunately, due to the node design that we are facing recently, there are less and less reasons to bring in that team. Now, I do think that Domino's Flaming Trinity is an amazing blast and fun, great team. Think it's great for pretty much everything up until about 6.1, but when we're talking about 6.2, 3, and 4, when we're talking about Lion's War, when we're talking about Lion's Quest, I just don't see Domino being as useful anymore. Now, I have taken my unduped Domino to rank 3 as a 5-star. It was largely to have a bit more fun with the game and have some crazy bleeds and crazy incinerates. Plus, Domino is a good day-to-day questing champion, just like Sunspot. She can clear quests very quickly, which was another reason why I wanted to rank her up, just to have like an easy daily questing option. And I do like her, I do value her, I do still think she's great. She has a great kind of like set of abilities. Unfortunately, most of them are quite RNG reliant, and I do not like that one bit about Domino though. But I do not want to deny her capabilities, and she is a good champion. Unfortunately, I think that just the same thing that happened with Blade slowly starting to happen with Domino, for example, and Marvel Construct Champions is moving on, and Domino might not be in the front seat of the train where Marvel Construct Champions is headed, because she's always going to be great for all of the content up until, let's say, 6.1, 6.2, and maybe some new released content, but most recent released contents like variants 3 and 4, Act 6.2, 3 and 4, recent iterations of Lion's Quest and Lion's War do not really seem to have that much use for Domino. So even though I think she has great amount of potential, I don't think she's what players need currently when dealing with an endgame content. That being said, I think Domino is one of the best 3 or 4 champions for any accounts first rank 5. I think any progressing account who's just starting to rank up their champions to rank 5 or rank 4, Domino is a wonderful option because of how well she deals with day-to-day quests and how quickly she can help you progress and get that Cavalier title. And yeah, after Domino, we're going to have Emma Frost. Emma Frost is another champion that seems to be going up and up in value. Even like on top of my head, naming nodes like Hazard Shift, Poison, Incinerate, Emma Frost can take, because when she's in diamond form, she's immune to both Poison and Incinerate. Additionally, we have Encroaching Stun being ever more so present, so Emma Frost can deal with that without any problems as well, so long as you can manage the power bars well. And more and more examples like that, where you want that stun immunity, where you want all of those immunities, Emma Frost seems to be able to answer. Also, we have that prowess path in 6.4, and Emma Frost is a fantastic option. And all in all, I think Emma Frost has always been an extremely great champion in Marvel Construct Champions. However, many people kind of like tend to overlook her due to the sheer amount of competition and more champions being quote unquote more shiny or having more access to some very big great numbers. But yeah, I think Emma Frost is becoming more and more useful, again due to by sheer coincidence of nodes being released in Model Concept Champions. And again, she is the third piece of the best mutant synergy team, which is Colossus, Omega, and Emma Frost. And all of those three champions combined cover so much ground, and that is a synergy team and a team setup that I really frequently use when exploring 6.4, for example. And having these great synergies with Omega Red, with Colossus obviously is helping. Additionally, being able to be immune to inverted controls, synergizing with Mysterio is super useful, and that is another synergy that I use for 6.4. So I just think that, yeah, by happenstance, her value is going up and up and up. There's also a very extensive Emma Frost review on my channel. If you type in Emma Frost KT1, you can find it. As a spot number 9, there's going to be a champion that's come out extremely recently, and that will be Storm Pyramid X. Now, she doesn't have anything on the champions that are ranked above her in this list, but the thing that she does have that's quite unique is when her stun gets shrugged off, she places even longer duration kind of like passive stun on opponents, and she's one of those champions that quite interestingly punishes opponents for purifying her abilities. Additionally, obviously, she has quite decent damage output. It's not quite to the level of Havok or Sunspot, but is still quite good. And yeah, she's a champion I'm also quite interested in. I'm not like the biggest fan of her, but I do see kind of like ease of life and convenience options in Storm Pyramid X. And I definitely do want to play about with her a bit more, and I think she has potential to be useful, maybe not in terms of absolutely necessary, but definitely easy to bypass some stuff with her ability to inflict that passive stun. So I think that's really cool. And spot number 10, and I know I'm going to be yelled at by many people again, is just going to be Iceman. I do value Iceman at 10th spot. Now, I do think Iceman has always been a solid mutant option. He's always a solid champion, but he is just that. He has triple immunities, and he can tank special 3s, and to a degree he can counter evade, even if that might not be the most reliable way of dealing with that. Now, that being said, obviously that alone makes him a really good champion, but again, I think that Model Concept Champions is moving on, and Iceman doesn't have the front seat to the train. Now, he will always be a solid champion due to his immunities, but as MCOC gets more and more complex, I think Iceman is going to have harder and harder time to keep up. Now, and one thing that is becoming more and more useful though for Iceman is his ability to shrug off stuns if he has Ice Armor active. So I think that is quite wonderful. But yeah, for me personally, Iceman is losing a bit of steam, but I still think he's a very great champion and also a very good initial rank up option for many people. But yeah, this video is like super long, so I must apologize for that, and I will try to off now like as quickly as I can. But as I said, mutant class is like the most stacked class with many great champions in the game. Now my mouse is absolutely right. I'm done, so I'm gonna leave you with Baby Yoda. Hit those like buttons, hit those sub buttons. Please forgive me for the lengthy video, and I'll catch you guys next time. See ya.